Go ahead, MJ.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I agree with what pretty much everything you're saying. Grant too. Are you do I was just wondering, are you guys aware of the 13th Amendment that is our true 13th Amendment?
Go ahead and elaborate.
It's here in the chat. So it is the titles of nobility. It was it was introduced in 1810, ratified in 1819. It's in, and you can read it there. If any citizen of the United States, except you couldn't be an esquire and be in the bottom part of the pyramid. You couldn't be an esquire and be in the Confederate. Running the Confederate that was honed. See, the Confederate in the States, that kind of got stuck there. So that Constitution brought it down to that place, what Grant was saying, where we could actually operate in global, international, as a recognized, actually being a nation, an American nation. And but they said, if you're going to be in that, you may not be an esquire, and if you do, we will take your citizenship away.
Right. The government that's running the United States, which again, it's well, this is problematic because the United States is not the same as the Republic. So
The American nation is what the Articles of Confederation says we are. That
right.
is the American nation.
Actually,
And
MJ, your point's very good because one of the things that Grant has pointed out several on all of our videos is that there's actually remedy in law for posterity. We do still
yeah.
exist. Our
Well, and the
nation
thing is,
still
they
exists.
had to create their own 13th Amendment back in around whatever that was, 1865, to actually, that's part of the reason they were trying to burn the Capitol in the War of 1814 to get rid of all this. And they were hoping it wouldn't show up. Well, it shows up in Colorado, because when I started investigating in Colorado, I called Colorado just to get the archives, and I said I want to see the first Constitution of Colorado. And they said, well, we have it archived in at Colorado State University, or Colorado University in Boulder, and I got my master's from there. And so I said, okay, good. And they gave me a link, and I pulled up the 1860. It was just basically our first document to how to set up our Colorado. We were a territory at that time in 1860, and I was looking through it, and there was the Constitution. Okay, cool. I go to the amendments. Okay, they're all there. And here's number 11, here's number 12, and here's number 13.
Anything you want to say on that, Grant? The point being, I think that you're making is no title of nobility, right, in the government.
Right.
Well, what a point
So
I'm
you're saying
making
it
is
was that
that
was in the Constitution.
pardon?
So you're saying the original 13th Amendment was there.
Correct. It is there. It
Well,
is
that's
there
one thing
because,
that always puzzled me. How could they take it out?
well, because what they have is fraud. This is fraudulent. It's the same people it's the same Luciferian group that in 33, 36 took the commandments and took out one of them and split the last commandment into two. How could they do that? How can you take out a commandment? How can you take out a commandment, have no idols, and then split the last commandment into two? Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife is number 9. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's stuff is number 10. We have two sets of 10 commandments, one for the Catholic Church and one for protesters.
Right.
And also, you know what else they did to that? And I've got the catechism from 1934 to show it. What is the third commandment, which is really the fourth commandment? The third commandment is thou shalt worship on the Sabbath. And what day is the Sabbath? Saturday is the Sabbath. Why did we change it? Because the Catholic Church had the authority to move it to Sunday. And it says it right there in 1934 in the catechism for the Catholic Church.
Just like the 360-day calendar going to 365.
We are dealing with these people who are Luciferian. They're either of Abel or Cain. There are no other choices. And of Cain, you know, of Abel says, Jesus Christ is Lord of my life, and I do what he says. And if he says to sacrifice this, then I do. Those of Cain say, no, I'm in charge. I'm on the throne. I am the little L Lord of my life. And so Cain just murdered him. He trespassed. He murders his brother because he doesn't like what he's doing. It's no different than the Luciferians are now. They murder because they don't like, they kill, steal, and destroy.
Yeah, I do want to insert, MJ. We agree, on we agree, on the greater part of everything. I think that when we do start talking about doctrine, though, and cryptic interpretations and literal versus literal interpretations of the Bible, people do go separate ways. They can go separate ways. So I do try to keep that kind of, sure, you could share your view on it. I don't like to get too deep on that because there are different interpretations people have, but I think there are some fact-based things that are pretty obvious that are significant, like your point you make about the Sabbath, the Catholic Church changing it from Saturday to
Well, I
Sunday.
think my point on Cain and Abel was when Cain did that, God said to him, I hear your blood screaming your brother's blood screaming to me from the ground.
Right, right,
and what he said, he didn't say to Cain, so you've got the electric chair.
right.
He just simply said to Cain, you will be an aimless wanderer and the ground will produce nothing for you.
Right. And I'm sure you're familiar, and I kind of don't want to go down this path either, but we've already talked about that there's a certain people. And what a lot of people don't know is that the seventh commandment, thou shalt not commit adultery, says thou shalt not taint your blood. You should not mix your blood. God created all things kind after kind. And adultery is not having a fling with some other man's wife. Adultery is mixing blood. It's I'm trying to remember the original word. Do you remember it, Josh, off the top of your head? It's mukesus, I think. It's amalgamation of blood. And people don't recognize that either. They've got an interpretation. So there are things that, when you look at that whole mixing of blood, and you look at the Canaanites and the Edomites, the Nadites, the fact that there was a direct bloodline from Adam all the way to Christ. And that bloodline, everybody knows all throughout the Old Testament, God was constantly telling his people to not be messing around with these foreign women and these foreigners, these other bloodlines. They were supposed to remain pure in their bloodline. And obviously that's, a completely politically incorrect stance to take in this world today, because they're all about pushing it. They're all about pushing the amalgamation of all peoples. Because again, it's about destroying nations, it's destroying racial identity and racial integrity, and ultimately even destroying male and gender identity, destroying humanity. And that's a big part of what this is all about. Alex had a hand raised, and then go ahead, MJ.
Yeah, I'm still looking at the images that you sent, MJ, from the Acts of Congress, and I don't know if you or maybe Grant knows the answer. I'm still confused, or to me, it's not clear. Why do they, in their enactment clause, they say, enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America. So now here they're acknowledging the Republic of America, and then later on in their language they just say of the United States. Is this with intent? And if so, why, and what is the difference? What I just would like to understand why they choose to leave out the of America in the language of the act, and then in the enactment clause they have it in there.
Well, I'd have to see the paperwork to make some kind of definitive answer to that, but I've not actually seen what you're talking about. But I think there is a distinction between the United States of America and the United States, and that is clearly designated and separated out in Title 28, 1746-1, as opposed to 1746-2.
Yeah, I agree. It is in every act of Congress, like in the statutes at large, everywhere you can read it, being enacted by assembled, of the United States assembled, and then in the language of their act, they just leave out the of America. Maybe MJ knows or can better.
Well, what I have understood is
Mhm.
United States is going to be your territorial.
Yeah,
United States of America is going to be your municipal or the Pope. And
DC.
that's and that one's already bankrupt. And that's right. Well, that's the one we're doing the bankruptcy for right now. That's the issue. That's the one who went defunct. And that's why Trump is doing what he's doing. He should just be honest and say this is what's happening. And the
Yeah, maybe we
territorial
can.
is trying to grab some of these positions, and the territorial is trying to become us.
Oh,
The instrumentality, they're
yeah.
trying to become the Confederate. In
Okay.
this bottom part of this, we got split when the South walked out.
So that would
And-
make sense. Okay, so then it is actually making sense then in the way that they are, well, if they would be in proper office, and maybe back
Yes.
then they were, maybe.
Because see, in that
But then
bottom,
back then, because we're looking at,
in that bottom
in
of the
1930,
pyramid,
yeah,
there's three sections.
yeah,
There's the
Yeah.
United States of America, which is styled in our Articles of Confederation. Then there's the territorial, which is the United States. And then there is United States of America without the which is the municipal, which is the Pope, which is gone now defunct.
Oh, what is the without the?
Yeah, I think it
Which
would
one is
help.
that?
United States of America without the, just
The
United States of America.
States. Well, where's the in the other ones?
And that's in our Articles of Confederation. Our style is with the word the with a T capitalized.
Oh,
That's our
the
style.
United States of America.
If you look at the Articles of Confederation, the very first one,
Yeah.
that's how we're styled.
Oh, I
remember,
see.
Remember, these are all businesses. And I don't know if you've ever
Yeah.
started a business, but when you start a business, you got to figure out what the name is of your business. Because you can't be calling yourself this and calling yourself that and you decide on the name of your business. And this is all business. This is the Confederate. And we were the small U, United States of America, the states of states. You were the state of Colorado, the state of New Hampshire. But what happened is when they took it over, they capitalized all the words. So now it's all capitals. And that's how you know it belongs to them. When it's small, it's ours.
Why did they switch out the off with four, or the four, like the four, they switched out the four to of, like the preamble says, we're creating this for the United States of America. But then it became United States of America.
Yeah, the title, it's so weird. The title says of America, but it's really for, and it should be a small U. For the small U, United.
Yeah, Grant, I think you can elaborate on that issue where they changed that. Doesn't that have to do with the time when they did their change when they?
I think that's when they did the switch, when they essentially set aside the republic and they no longer operated it, and they created this federal territorial government, and they adopted the Constitution of the people as basically the charter for their new corporation.
Right. And they gave it a new 13th Amendment.
They gave it a new name.
A new 13th Amendment, and that's why Trump renamed the Gulf of Mexico. He had to rename it because they're working on stuff. They're redoing things, and now he's calling it the Gulf of America. And I don't know if he's working for us, white posterity. He doesn't talk about us.
No.
Or if he's working for the territorial. I think Annabin writes, I listened to her Thursday night thing, and to the coordinators, and she said that that territorial is fighting hard to set up their own republic and take over that.
Yeah, let me elaborate on that point, because that's something, and welcome, Joe. Joe joined us a few minutes ago. That's something that, again, Joe was running the blog talk radio show for the Republic of the United States of America. And just in summary, and then maybe Grant, if you can elaborate on any knowledge you have on this, or Joe. Pretty much, I'm paraphrasing all. Back in 2010, several patriots around the country, were tired of what was going on with the Obama administration. Very, anti God, anti, conservative, anti-Christian, anti, conservatives, Christians, patriots were really kind of, motivated to try to do something, and stood up and made some moves that we now understand were invalid moves, but they tried to get, send letters to all the governors to get them to step down, which they, were in the wrong to do that. They had no right to do that to that federal territorial plane, but that's the approach they took. And then, nonetheless, there were many legitimate patriotic Americans that were trying to do something. And then it all fell apart, which Joseph can elaborate. I've heard Joe say people were mysteriously dying, they were disappearing. It just got broken up because it became a very heated thing. It was even in the mainstream media, the Republic for the United States of America. So it got broken up, but then lo and behold, it kind of comes back on the scene here with, where they're saying James Geiger is the president. And like I told MJ when we were talking earlier, James Carpenter in Colorado called me and said that James Geiger asked him to call me because of all the work I was doing with Righteous Army and the BigVirusHoax.com. We had several back and forths trying to figure each other out. And I expressed my concerns to James at that time about the Q psyop and, how it mirrors, the same psyop they did when the Jews took over Russia with Operation Trust. And that, it became clear to me when Trump was letting Fauci tell him what to do, and he was pushing, the deadly metal things that get stuck in people's arms and inject poisons into them, that, he was doing, obviously working, for the wrong side. But of course, they had all their psychological operations all over the internet. And all their, it's the old saying, the devil doesn't have to go around lying. All he has to do is get 10 people to do the lying and 100 people to follow the liars, right? Once he gets the BS started, he don't have to do no more work because there's plenty of stupid people to push it forward. I mean, that's just how it is. So all I could do was stand on what was obvious and common sense to me, and declare 5 points I did on one of Joe's shows, how it became evident to me that it seemed highly likely that the Republic for the United States of America was currently, while it might have started off legitimate, and while there might be people in it today that are sincere and meaning well, that it's controlled opposition, that it's been infiltrated, hijacked, and it's controlled. And Joe, after being on their show for 10 years, concurred with me. He said he agreed. I brought up 5 specific points. He said that made perfect sense. This is a time when Eric Dingus was coming on the shows a lot, and he was talking, quite a bit. One of the things that I concur with Eric a lot about is everything should be based on the Exodus 18 model and the local jurisdictions. It's family and community and counties. That's where the authority lies. Eric is very right about that. But again, even Eric Dingus is, in my estimation, very right about a lot, but very wrong on some very key important things, mainly the ones that we're discussing on these videos. I've suspected, Eric said that Anna von Reitz is working for the Vatican. He said David Strait's working for the Vatican. David Straight said Anna von Reitz is working for the Vatican. Eric and David Straight would not get along with each other, but I was trying to pull them together to work as a team. They wouldn't have it. So, just a cluster, right? It's how come people can't pull themselves together? Well, I believe, and I've indicated this other videos, we're discussing it now. It's because they do not want the posterity to know who they are, because the posterity are the authority by law, by declaration, by law, by Supreme Court rulings. They created the nation. The creator of a thing is the owner of a thing, and they declared that they did so to preserve it, to ordain it for themselves and their posterity for a reason, because they knew that there was going to be infiltration and corruption, and they wanted to, like anybody would, protect what they have for their children and their children's children, and so on and so on. So the posterity thing is a very significant issue. That's why we've been discussing it. Now we're on our 9th discussion, because the discussion needs to be had. I'd love for Grant, in his own words, to say what you've said many times, because it's so true, that these other groups out there, they all have their little organizations, their little, protect us, stand up for us, ACLU and everything else. Well, what about our rights? What about our rights as What about racial rights, racial preservation, racial integrity? What about, we've got, freedom of religion, we've got gay rights, homosexual rights, women's rights. So what about racial rights, racial identity, racial preservation, racial integrity? What about political rights? When you have laws that say you are a posterity, you were granted that by the Treaty of Paris. My son has made the point, those that are posterity, we could go over to England and say, hey, my great, 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 great grandfather had a treaty with your great, 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 great grandfather. Are you going to uphold it? So there's clearly significance to the posterity issue, and that's only now becoming the tip of the spear. It's literally now becoming the tip of the spear.
Yeah.
That's why these conversations need to be had. We've had a few where we're trying to sort out, again, that middle of the road thing. I made a comment earlier that there's some that have come on the show, and now that you're here, Joe, I'll say Joe's one of them, that would be the first to admit that any Tom, Dick, or Harry, or Jose, or Louis that comes over from Mexico or India or Guatemala or whatever does not and should not have the same rights, and they're a 14th Amendment citizen. They'll acknowledge that, and they'll acknowledge that there's some significance to the fact that there's such a thing as a people that founded the nation, and it would make sense that they'd want to protect that for themselves and their children. And the word posterity is clearly defined, but yet all of a sudden they find themselves in the middle of the road. Well, I don't want to be 14th. I want to be posterity. We were addressing it earlier on this talk, right? Grant, you mentioned, at that time in the founding of the nation, they made a way. They made a way for, as MJ said, those who were white and European could come over here and be here for X amount of years and show good character, and they could be grafted in, to posterity. They are part of the family. They're part of that nation that was founded, godly nation. A godly nation made by godly people, a religious nation for a religious people, which many, if not all of our forefathers indicated, right? That we were a nation founded by religious people for a religious people, the moral issue. So the Republic for the United States of America, many of the people that are involved with that, again, they're well-intended, that they mean well. I'm not saying that, any one of them, I'm not pointing a finger to any one, other than I might have concerns about the upper echelon leadership, who's controlling them, where are they getting their funding, who's telling them what to do and what not to do, who's really pulling the strings with this so-called republic. And that goes to the point that was just being made. That very system, that corrupt federal territorial plane, is trying to create a new republic. They're trying to come out with the republic, their new version of the republic. And this is what Eric Dingus actually totally sides for. He's really all for that. Oh no, we're all one in Christ. We're all equal. There's no male, there's no female, there's no race, there's no moral issues. That's an individual things. But
Oh my God.
we can all have our own little societies, and everybody can make their own determinations on that. But we're all one in Christ, and we're all the republic. We're all renowned. That's paraphrasing what I understand to be Eric Dingus's position. So while he's right about local authority and the people are the power, when you really push him, and I've pissed him off in meetings in the past, where if I start talking about the moral issues, and wait, aren't we going by God's law? Well, whose law are we going by here? We're supposed to be going by God's law in the republic. It's a godly nation. Then all of a sudden he's ticked off because I'm bringing that up. And that will tick off a lot of people, because there's a lot of people that don't want nothing to do with God. They don't want nothing to do with God's laws, even though God says, walk in my commandments and you'll be blessed. People don't want to hear it. They want to live the way they want to live, to the extent of godlessness, immorality, perverse, self-destructive, and everything else that I've been harping on for the last few years. So there is clearly a shaking going on. And right now, this posterity issue and discussion is the tip of the spear, because that's the pinnacle of where the people that founded a godly nation for a godly people are the founders. They are the owners. They do have privity of blood, and they're all around America. They need to recognize who they are. They need to stand up. They need to organize, because they and they alone can do
Amen.
something about the corrupt government. And no hands are raised, but I'll yield back to Grant, if you will, please, and then anybody else wants it.
Well, I would say that those people would have standing to go to the Supreme Court on issues regarding the Republic and what's been done. You know, they're all the time talking about the Insurrection Act and the 14th Amendment. Well, to me, if congressmen, if they went and separated themselves and they're no longer acting as the agent for the people, which the Constitution created them to be, and now they're acting in a separate, they separated themselves from the parent state of we the people. Now they walked away from us and they're no longer operating our government, but they're operating their own government. Is that not the quintessential ideal of insurrection?
Absolutely.
And then the other thing you was talking about was that in Article 1 of the Treaty of Paris, King George III says that his successors and heirs are bound to that agreement.
Thank you. That's a very, very significant point. I appreciate you bringing that up, because that goes hand in hand with the obvious and true lawful definition of the word posterity, because posterity are heirs. So why would they even mention heirs, let alone mention the word posterity?
About his heirs, so which King Charles III today is one of his heirs and successors to that throne, and that means that King Charles and his government is bound to that treaty.
Right. And the point I wanted to make is that the word heirs is significant here, because posterity are heirs.
Yeah, to me, the term heir was clearly recognized in the common law.
Yeah, and on that point, as you've mentioned many times, the Supreme Court has ruled that the Constitution needs to be viewed through the lens of common law, because that's the law that existed when they created it.
Right.
Well, you keep saying standing. You know, you
Okay,
have
Joe, before you get started, I mentioned this earlier. I'm going to tell you now, Joe, I will not let you come on and be argumentative, but if you have a question or a comment, you're free to do it. Otherwise, I'll mute you.
What's argumentative mean?
No, if you have a question, ask it, or if you have a comment, make it. Go ahead.
But I know, but you said argumentative. What's that mean?
Sometimes it's not only my opinion, but the opinion of a handful of others, that you'll get kind of belligerent and combative and just argumentative, and we don't have time for that, and we don't want to do that. We just want to save it for questions and some brief comments. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Well, when people call names or something, I will defend myself, okay? All right, but anyway, you keep saying standing. First of all, to go to the Supreme Court, you have to, have injury in fact, you have to have causation, and you have to have readdressability. Where are those 3 points in your argument here?
All right, let me answer that first. Just so everybody knows, Joe sent me an email today. Let me respond to your email first. Joe sent an email essentially saying, oh, if you want to put this forth, everything you're talking about, to the Supreme Court and make your argument. We don't have an argument, Joe. As far as we're concerned, you might have an argument. We don't. We know this is true. It's crystal clear to us.
That's not what you just said earlier, though. Hang on. That's not what you just said.
Hold on. Let me finish my point. So to us, we don't see ourselves as having a controversy at all right now. It's all we're doing is organizing those of us that are posterity so that we can go to the Supreme Court. We can present our case to change our status to state citizens based on the original republic.
Okay, to go to the Supreme
Hold
Court.
on.
Hang on. To go to the Supreme Court.
Hold on, Joe.
Answer the question.
Joe, I will. The people that do that, all right, will have the lawful standing to bring issues or controversies to the Supreme Court.
That's not what. No, you won't come. You'll never get into the Supreme Court with that right there. It's not what the Supreme Court. I just told you. You have to have 3 elements in a matter of fact law to bring your case to the Supreme Court. You have to have injury in fact. Okay, you want me to define them all for you? Causation, and you have to have readdressability. Now, number 1, injury in fact. You must show that you have suffered a concrete and particularized injury, or that such an injury is imminent. Okay, do you have that?
Absolutely. Yep,
Well,
and that can be done. Grant, please elaborate on that.
Well, I don't want to say too much, but yeah, I think there's injury. I think there's multiple injuries.
When you take somebody's rights away from them, that's an injury.
You think.
When you take somebody's fortune away from them, that's an injury.
We're not talking about other people. You can't represent other people. You got to represent you. All right, causation. There must be a direct link between the injury and the actions of the defendant. So explain your causation
Yeah, that could be
as
absolutely.
an individual.
I think
Well,
that's-
you keep saying yeah, but can you explain it to me though? Can you tell me what they are?
No,
No.
we know, but we're not going to be sharing
We
that
know,
right
but we're
now.
not going to tell you. Okay.
That's right, right. There's things that we're not going to be sharing publicly right now, Joe.
What's the reason? I mean, you just made a statement that everybody has to come together and get together and have standing in the Supreme Court, and I'm telling you, you don't have no standing because you're not telling me what the standing is. What standing are you going to have? They're going to laugh you right out of there. You'll never even get writ of certiorari in the Supreme Court. You'll never even get there.
Well, you're wrong, Joe, but
Okay, well,
Yeah.
well, maybe you'll prove me wrong, but until then, right now, you don't. So.
right. Well, yeah, I will say you're wrong. And to answer your
Okay.
question, what we're doing right now is having public conversations to wake up and alert true Americans who are posterity, who have privity of blood rights, privileges, and
Wake us up
immunities.
how? I just asked you. How are you waking us up? How can we bring you just said have standing in this Grant made a statement. I suggest those people have standing to bring the issues to the Supreme Court. I just told you, I just combated that with you have to have three elements here to have standing in the Supreme Court, and you haven't answered one of them directly.
Because we're not going to tell you what that is. We know what that is.
Okay. So it's private. Okay.
That's right. In fact, as I've indicated in the website, these are public conversations. Only
they're not
members.
private. You just told me you're private. You're not going to let us know.
Well, that's right. We are a private member association, and we will have private inside talks. This is a public conversation to let the American people know the posterity is here and we're rising.
Okay, you haven't answered all three of them, any elements to get you. Like I said, man, prove me wrong. Go this. I'll be happy to see you go to the Supreme Court, but you'll never get there.
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, I'm intrigued. I've said to people many times, and I might have mentioned it earlier. The thing I like about Joe is he's very hard-headed and obstinate, and he asks questions, and he's a tough nut out of Connecticut. I love that about him. But sometimes I'm also like, I can't make him out. Is he really just playing devil's advocate to try to make progress? Or is he really in to try to, disturb and create problems? I don't know sometimes, Joe. But I would think that you, being posterity, as you've indicated you are, would be with us and working with us, not against us.
I can't work with you because you just told me everything's private. I mean, I just asked you what your three elements are to get rid of certiorari in the Supreme Court, and you won't tell me. So how can I work with you?
This is a public conversation, and right now in this public conversation, we're letting it known that we're not going to address that issue, Joe, in this public conversation.
But that's the whole point here. You're telling everyone to get posterity to bring these issues to the Supreme Court. Nobody knows how.
I didn't. I never said anything about posterity bringing anything to the Supreme Court. You did. I didn't say anything.
No, I didn't. Grant did. Grant made the statement earlier.
No. What Grant said is that the posterity are the only ones who will have the lawful standing to do so, and he's correct.
Okay, and I'm okay. We're just going around in circles because you have no lawful standing by the conversation here and not having a private conversation, not telling anybody about it. Right now, from what I've heard, if I'm just some Joe Blow listening, we don't have any lawful standing to go to the Supreme Court right now. You will not get writ or certiorari in the Supreme Court with what you have right now. What you said.
You're wrong.
Okay. All right. I'm telling you what the rules of the court are. You're telling me I'm wrong. Okay.
Go ahead, Josh.
I'm just curious as to why anybody would think they would file an initial pleading as a writ of certiorari. Where did that come from?
I just told you there's three elements to have writ of certiorari to go to the Supreme Court.
To have writ of certiorari, but he's asking
you have to have injury in fact, causation, and readdressability. Okay, those are the three matters of law that you have to bring to file writ of certiorari in the Supreme Court. I mean, what pleadings have you filed thus far? I mean, are you there yet?
Listen, Joe.
If you're filing an initial petition, Joe, you would use a certiorari when you're using appellate jurisdiction, going from the trial to the appellate to the Supreme Court. But if you file an initial pleading in the Supreme Court, you're not filing a writ of certiorari. So I'm just wondering where you got that.
You have to get into the Supreme Court. You have to file a writ of certiorari to get to the Supreme Court. So you're not even why would you go to the appellate court or the district court first? Why would you go there?
I wouldn't.
This
I'm
is a
asking
Supreme
you.
Court issue.
I'm asking you, why would you file an initial pleading as a writ of certiorari when that's an appellate matter?
Well, how is it an appellate matter? Because you've already said that you have 2 Supreme Court cases in Happersett, and
Because-
I don't know what the
Because
other one was.
that's what a writ of certiorari is. If your case is dismissed in trial court, you file a writ of certiorari to the appellate court, and then you file a writ of certiorari to the Supreme Court.
But we know we have to go directly to the Supreme Court with this issue.
Right,
Why
but
would you go to? Why would you go to a lower court first? That's already ruled upon it.
So if you're going to file directly with them, you're not filing a writ of certiorari. If you're filing
You have
directly,
to file that with a Supreme Court petition. You have
Didn't
to.
you understand what he just said, Joe? He said a writ of certiorari, what it's for is to go from one
All right,
court to
where are you
another
at
court.
now? Are you in the appellate court or district court, or have you even gone to the Supreme
No,
Court yet?
we don't have any cases in any court. We don't need to anything. Right now, that's not even our focus or concern right now.
So what's the point then? What are we trying to have here established?
What
What
we're
are we
doing
trying
right
to do?
now is letting the American people know that there's a whole bunch of them out there that are
Go to the
posterity and they have
Supreme
privity of
Court.
blood and they're the owners of this nation.
that if you go to the Supreme Court initially on an initial pleading with a writ of certiorari, you're going to confuse everybody. They're going to know you don't know what you're talking about, and it's going to be dismissed because you don't use a writ of certiorari for an initial pleading. That's all I'm saying.
How many cases have you brought to the Supreme Court so far?
I haven't needed to go to the Supreme Court so far.
What do you mean you haven't needed to? I mean, well, how many cases have you won in the lower courts so far?
I've still got pending cases right now
Pending.
that haven't been adjudicated, but I know what a writ of certiorari is.
So hang on.
Let
So
me ask
you're
you a
in the
question,
United
Joe.
States
Hold on,
District
Joe.
Court right now?
Hold on, Joe. Right. Hold on, Joe. As you know, so I don't know why you're even asking that. You know that my son has filed cases in these lower courts, and the courts have actually refused to hear his case based on the reality that they have.
No, that's not. Well, they dismissed him without prejudice because why?
No.
Lack of jurisdiction.
Lack of jurisdiction.
Lack
The
of
courts have no
jurisdiction because
the
you're
courts
failing to
have
state a claim where remedy could be where you can get remedy.
No. Only after he made it clear that he was posterity did the courts say they were letting him argue.
Okay.
They
Hang
were
on,
letting,
Mo.
hold on, Joe. I'm going to mute you for a second,
Mike.
Joe. I'm going to mute you for a second, Joe, because you're bringing up almost purposefully an argumentative approach to this. You know full well that my son filed a case and he was going back and forth with the lower courts, and the federal courts were hearing him for 3 months. And then only after he submitted his documents showing that he was posterity and that he was on the land as a owner of this land in the Republic, only then did the judge say, oh, we have no jurisdiction on this case then. Now you can unmute. Go ahead, Alex. Hold on, Joe. Alex, raise your hand. Go ahead, Alex.
I have a question for Josh because as far as I remember, Grant said that there's remedy in all these statutes for the court to hear one of the people under the laws of the United States of America. And so if I understood that correctly, and if there's remedy, why did the court, once they knew that Josh is one of the people, why did they refuse to hear him, even though they could have, if they wanted to?
Well, they were probably wondering why I went into that court to begin with, and why I didn't go to the proper court. But the trial court.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
What would have been the proper court if not the? I guess I don't know if you went to the state or federal district court.
I went to a federal district court, which is a trial court.
The
Right.
posterity need to go directly to the Supreme Court, directly.
Oh,
the
really?
Posterity, yes.
Isn't that what I'm saying? They told me no. You just contradicted yourself.
No, Joe, you are contradicting yourself.
No, I'm not.
No, we've made it clear that the posterity goes directly to the Supreme Court, Joe. You've known all along that that's our position. And
That's
we've
what I just said. And Josh told me no.
It tells you right in the Constitution, in Article 4, that controversies between states and citizens, you know, that clause, the Supreme Court shall have original jurisdiction. It tells you right there in the Constitution. Now, there is no distinction between the people and states, you know, as mentioned in Downs versus Bidwell. So if the people represents the state and there is no distinction and the Supreme Court has original jurisdiction, then one of the people or one of the states would immediately file with the Supreme Court.
And again, when we say people, we're talking posterity.
Okay, so you filed it. You filed in the wrong court. So how come you haven't gone to the Supreme Court then? Yes,
I haven't needed to right now.
There's no
Why
need
go
to.
to district court
To.
then?
I don't have a controversy. I'm just
Well,
making. I'm just warning you that if you're going to go take a case to the Supreme Court, don't make the mistake that somebody that I know just made, and they went and brought these issues up and filed a controversy against the U.S. government and against the state of. I'm not going to mention his state, but big no-no. I mean, they got every legal right to exist, and he just filed a controversy against the government.
And let me clarify it for you further,
But
Joe.
let me finish my point. If you're intending on going to the Supreme Court on an initial petition for a writ of certiorari, they're going to look at you and know exactly, they're going to know you don't know what you're talking about if you file a writ of certiorari, because that's an appellate matter. It's not something you file as an initial petition.
And here's a significant answer as well, Joe. And I
Yeah.
believe you should know this already because I've conveyed it to you. What we're doing is we're working on a process for posterity whereby they can go directly to the Supreme Court. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Because
Yeah.
right now there are posterity.
But you
that are
didn't answer
considered-
Alex's question. Then why did you go to that lower court? Then why did you do that?
Josh is, yeah, he said for
Because
the
he didn't
experience.
understand at that time.
Right. He didn't understand at that time.
Okay,
We're
but he
learning,
still,
man, as
but,
we go.
but he still didn't. He still hasn't gotten his remedy that he originally thought he could go to that court for. So why hasn't he gone up the ladder yet?
Because we are going through right now, we're working on a process for him and me and you and everybody else who's posterity to use so that they have a lawful standing to go directly there. Right now, you don't have a lawful standing to go there until you complete the process that we're in the process of working on for the posterity. So we're actually working for the posterity right now because my son's working, burning the midnight oil on behalf of posterity across America right now. He's doing work on behalf of millions of people. Grant and my son are doing work on behalf of millions of people. They're getting things in line for millions of people. That's what's happening right now.
And so what do we got to get in line here? You won't tell me.
We're
For
working
millions
on
of people, but we can't talk about it here.
Drive over to Grant's in a week or two and meet us there, and then we'll talk.
Yeah, Joe, if you're real serious, Joe, you'll be there. When we meet with Grant, you'll be there. In fact, if you're not there, that'll just tell me you're not serious, so we don't even need you to talk to us anymore. Because you asked some questions, and we're inviting you. We're opening the door. Grant
I'm here
already
now.
did.
Why? There's nothing that's I mean, if you're going to file any process, how are you going to let millions of people know about it? And if we can't talk about it on a YouTube video,
We're going to discuss that in a private meeting with Grant at his location of choice and within the next couple of weeks. And we're inviting you to come. You're welcome to be there. I believe Alex said she's going to go. If she can elaborate, her hand's raised now. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I would love to go. I'd love to go when it's warmer. So but yeah, it depends on you guys because you guys are the initial party there. But what I wanted to, if Downs v. Bidwell said that, and I was just kind of looking for that language. If I understood correctly, Josh, you said Downs v. Bidwell said that there's no distinction between the states and the people.
Yeah,
Is
it's
that correct?
wrong case. Wrong case. It's Fenn Hollow versus Dones.
He misquoted.
Yeah, I misquoted the case. It's Fenn Hollow versus Doane.
Fenhall
Fenn-
Doan.
How do you spell that?
Fenn Hollow, FenHallow versus Dones, Doanes.
Okay. So if they determined that in that case, how does that square with the 10th Amendment where they mention the states and the people? And also in Article 3, I know in Article 3, the judicial jurisdiction, they only talk about citizens and not people. So would that mean that this only applies to U.S. citizens, Article 3, where citizens can sue and not to the people? And Yeah, then again, the 10th Amendment mentions people and states or states. Do you understand it within the context of that case that you just cited?
Go ahead, Grant.
Well, that case was simply stating that the people, as we the people, are who are the owners. We created the state. We created the state pursuant to our constitutions and submitted to
Right.
Congress and joined the Union under Article 4, Section 4. So,
Uh-huh.
and then you've got the Ninth Amendment, which talks about the unenumerated rights that we the people reserved in legal relations to that federal government that we created. And then we had the 10th Amendment, which was the right of the states that we created or the people. So right there in the 10th Amendment, to me, it clearly stating that there isn't a distinction between the state and the people.
So that
And
means
those people are recognized and referred to in the Constitution as those citizens, the capital C citizens. And they're the ones
okay, in the
that
preamble, yeah.
directly are referred to, and they're under the controversies clauses in Article 3.
So then the 11th Amendment that says that the federal courts have no jurisdiction over a citizen suing another state.
That's right.
Would that mean, but then you have
They came back.
states.
They came back because it was in the original Article 3 that could happen, and that's when in Chisholm versus Georgia, that was the case that was being argued, and they clearly stated that under Article 3, Chisholm had the right to sue the state of Georgia. So that's
Yes,
when
exactly.
certain groups of people came back and added the 11th Amendment, which precluded citizens of the several states suing another state or a foreign state. Or
Well, yeah, but then with that, the problem with that then was that the Supreme Court twisted the 11th Amendment, and now they invented the doctrine.
I don't think so. After the 11th Amendment got adopted to the Constitution, then the new case reflected that new amendment to the Constitution that you're referring to.
Right, but the problem then was that in Hans v. Louisiana in 1871, I think, which Hans then relied on the 11th Amendment, and the 11th Amendment did not say that a citizen cannot sue their own state. And Hans was a citizen of Louisiana, and he sued Louisiana, and that was the point where the Supreme Court invented the doctrine of the 11th Amendment and immunity, sovereign immunity, and they just pulled out of thin air that because Congress apparently didn't say that they were going to abrogate sovereign immunity in their 11th Amendment, that must mean now that no citizen can sue
I'd have to
their
read
own
the
state.
case.
Oh yeah,
I've not
I
read the
mentioned that to you before. I find that so egregious, one of these unlawful doctrines. But yeah, read the case. That's basically the
I'd have to read
dispute.
it to see exactly what they said.
Yeah, that's Hans v. Louisiana. It's 1871, I think, or I think so. Or
And Grant, I know you got a lot on your mind, but I think I did bring that point to you a couple months back, and you read it that day. You said, "No, Mike, I just read that case," and you gave the clarification that they.
That's what it seemed. I didn't go into great about skimming through it, and that seemed to me what the court was saying. And again, the question would be, and by 1870, they would have been people who were state citizens, and then they would have been U.S. citizens. And then the question would become, could a U.S. citizen sue their own state?
No, it was about a state citizen. We specifically argued that Hans was a citizen of Louisiana suing his own state, and the 11th Amendment did not forbid him to do that. It was only for citizens suing other states, not their own.
Well, so you're saying that the court said it was only for citizens suing other states?
No, the court said something twisted the 11th Amendment into saying what it doesn't say. They said, even though it's not explicit in the language of the 11th Amendment, we kind of assume that it must mean that it applies to all citizens suing states, regardless of whether it's their own states or other states of the Union. If you read the 11th Amendment, that language only says that the federal powers, federal judicial power
Saying is,
shall not extend
if,
to
I understand that,
huh?
but what I'm saying is
Lowercase
that
citizens.
it could have been in that specific court case. What was the status of the person who was suing the state? Was it a state citizen of Louisiana or a U.S. citizen having residency in that state as a state citizen?
Yeah, that would need to be
I'm not
clarified
sure.
because it's a little concerning to me already, Alex, how you're describing
Well-
the court being wishy-washy, like we don't know, blah,
Well,
blah,
I'm
blah.
sure in that 11th Amendment, when it says the judicial power shall not extend to those controversies, it's using this the lowercase c, citizen, well, which is important to note. Because it doesn't extend to controversies between U.S. citizens, different states. So it does
Okay,
use
that's a good
lowercase c.
point. Yeah, that's a good
Same.
point. But Mike, that should be concerning to you, because there's so much that the Supreme Court did with their unlawful doctrines. I mean, there's the other one with the judicial immunity that's also just invented out of thin air, completely at odds with the Treaty of Paris, completely at odds.
Right, but
Um,
again, is it at odds for posterity or is it at odds for a U.S. citizen, 14th Amendment? That becomes the distinction.
Correct.
In other
That's
words, we're going to view
also a
it.
good point. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They do certainly have judicial immunity over 14th Amendment citizens because they created 14th Amendment citizens. Therefore, they're the principal and the owner. The 14th Amendment citizen is their agent, so they do have judicial immunity over 14th Amendment citizens.
Yeah,
You
they've
can
even
argue that.
they've even ruled the
But-
14th Amendment citizens are property and franchises of that government. So of course they would not have that right, whereas posterity would.
Yeah, but their argumentation is just it's their arguments of why there is judicial immunity are baseless, regardless of to who they to whom they apply. I mean, they say it's coming from the common law. The king can do no wrong. They say it is for the benefit of the public. They say
But right on that note, they're saying that they are sovereigns. And
correct.
the sovereign can do no wrong. That's like going back to Grant's point about Obama saying you don't know what you're doing, let the sovereign take care of you.
They're telling
They're putting themselves in a sovereign capacity over
Yeah.
14th Amendment citizens.
telling you.
Okay. Yeah, I guess if you look through that argument, that would make it logical again. They're just not saying it, but that's where they would be coming from. So yeah, I guess yeah.
Dave, go
Um,
ahead. You've had your hand raised for a while.
I got a problem with something, you guys. I'm trying to figure this out now. If we're talking about, you guys were mentioning how they label the United States of America, and this, and how it's spelled in the capitals and whatnot. I've got the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and I'm looking at this, and I've come across at the very bottom where it says, well, actually at the top, the first says unanimous declaration, and then it goes into real small letters of the 13 united, not big letters, then it goes to capital States of America. And as I read all the way down to the bottom, I come across where it says that they want to, so small, my eyes are so bad. They're going to separate any connection between them and the state of Great Britain. That's impossible. In 1776, Great Britain was not a state. I just looked it up. Is that wording going to be a problem? Where they're trying to say that they're separated like that? Would that be something
They
that,
could have been referring to a state in international law, not one of the several states of the Union.
Figure it out. You'll learn. you want to know bad enough.
So the Act of Union in 1707 united the Kingdom of England and the Kingdom of Scotland, forming the Kingdom of Great Britain. So in 1776, it should have been referred to as the Kingdom of Great Britain, not a state of Britain. You see where I'm saying there? I just
No,
was
but
reading.
I'd suggest you probably go, if you go get a law dictionary and look up nation and state and territories, and learn to make the distinction between what they're saying and how they apply when they're talking about the several states of the Union, as opposed to because they refer to the state of Israel.
Right. Okay.
International law, it's the state of Israel.
On here it says the Kingdom of Great Britain was a sovereign state, meaning it was an independent entity with its own government laws, but not
Right
compromised.
there. Did you read it? Said the Kingdom of Great Britain, a sovereign state?
Yeah.
Well,
Yep.
there you go. I
Okay,
mean, that answers your question.
guys, and I come across it, and I'm like, wait a minute, this damn thing says it's something different than what it's claiming to be, actually.
No, but that's great. I'm glad you brought that up, Tate, because it goes to show you how wording is so significant. Because you were thinking they should have been called the kingdom, not the state, but yet you go on reading it, it says the kingdom, a sovereign state.
Now see how they used the 13.
The word state obviously means like a state of mind, a state of being, a state of presence, right? So that word itself is used to hold something in a position.
Well, I remember the way I asked you guys, and whoever can answer it. We were talking.
MJ, do you have your hand raised? Because it looks like your hand's hidden behind this thing going across the top of my. Yeah, go ahead, MJ.
Yes, I do. Tave, where did you find that? Where it was a small U? Was that in the Declaration of Independence you're talking about?
Yes, at the very top, where you
Okay.
read where it's in Congress, July 4, 17, says unanimous declaration. Then it goes into small letters of the 13 united, all small capital, and then goes to uppercase states of America.
Right. And that's because, see, states of America, that is what I was talking about. It's the states of states. And it is an instrumentality of the Union. It is the Confederate. The states of states is the Confederate. And it was just that medium gray part of that pyramid I had. And see, that's why they said that the Articles of Confederation wasn't quite complete. And so, and the reason is because if the states wouldn't give money to, come together and give money to do anything at at this level where they all would get together, then it couldn't do anything. And the Brits didn't like that.
Well,
and that's why people like, Patrick Henry, and actually the whole state of Rhode Island didn't even show up because they knew it was going to be a problem.
Now on the Bill of Rights, I see where John Adams signs it Vice President of the United States. Doesn't say of America.
No.
But then apostrophe and it says the President of the Senate.
Right, because he wasn't. Because that's the Confederate.
Okay. Now here was my one question I couldn't remember. I wanted to ask you guys a couple times. At this time now, when we've come to the 13 colonies and when they've made this choice and everything's documented, the 14th state, whichever, I can't even remember what it is, do they have any posterity whatsoever because everything is drawn up for the original 13 from there on out? Or is it just those 13 and then from the 14th on it changes? States being admitted into the Union, I'm saying. Do you understand what I'm saying? Is there a line they're going to draw and say, no, you can't go any farther?
Well, those states, those were the territories, and they were settled by Americans.
Mm-hmm.
And once they settled into those territories, they formed their own states and created their own constitutions and joined the Union pursuant to Article 4, Section 4.
Okay.
So yeah, they were the people. It was the people who settled those states.
So basically,
I'm thinking maybe I'm thinking maybe to bring this recording to an end because I don't want it to go too long, and I just want to recap with Joe.
Okay.
I think, inadvertently brought up just, the capstone to this conversation tonight. Did you shut that because of the dogs? Just Joe, what we're doing is we're putting forth an effort. We've established an organization, a private membership association, specifically for those people who have privity of blood, who are posterity, that go back to the founding fathers, who established and ordained for themselves and their posterity the Constitutional Republic of the United States of America. We're having a discussion on these issues and trying to do our best to bring it to the attention of the American people so that those who are rightfully heirs, they are posterity and heirs, can begin to learn, become familiar with the issues that we're discussing. If they have questions, ask questions. If they have comments, there's people out there that have information that maybe none of us have, and they're on the same wavelength as us, and we want them to join with us. We all need to join forces. We need to join our minds together. So I'm simply putting forth the effort here, like I was doing with righteousarmy.org for 2 or 3 years. What was my effort there? Trying to get, before I knew about all of this, I was just trying to get the American people to stand up in their communities and their cities and their states so that when they pull some more crap on us, we can all unite and organize. And I'm still of that mindset. I believe that approach to defending all of ourselves, whether you're well, wait, no, I can't say whether you're a 14th Amendment citizen, can I? Because they are property of the United States government by law. So I can't be telling a 14th Amendment citizen to go up in arms against the United States government, because then I'm treasonous, right? And they would rightfully label me so. But if as you know, I always took the approach with Righteous Army that we are putting forth a peaceful, lawful effort to regain sanity and to regain our constitutional republic. I always made that very clear. We don't need to go to war. That's what they want. They want to instigate a bloodbath. They've done it before. They did it with the Civil War. They did it with World War I. They did it with World War II. And they want to create another one now if they can. That's their purpose. But I've been putting forth a major effort, making it crystal clear it's peaceful and lawful. And it just so happens that now some lawful issues have surfaced by the grace of God that are highly relevant about who has standing. And lo and behold, it's the bloodline posterity of the people who founded this nation. And there's millions of them around this country that don't even know that. So my task that God Almighty has ordained me is to help make that awareness prevalent for people to join the movement.
And how will they find out? How will they find out if they're posterity? Because all the information has been clouded and burned and destroyed.
Yeah, hopefully, Joe, by you pointing them to taps-pma.com, hopefully by you pointing them to these videos we're doing and these conversations so they can listen and so they can join in. Like Seth is here. Seth hasn't said a word. I appreciate him being here the whole time. He doesn't have to say anything. I don't even know who he is, but he could be a government informant agent for all we know, but we have nothing to hide. Everything we're doing is peaceful and lawful and truthful. So people can join all they want. People can do all they want.
You're separating the people. You're saying there's a special noble class of people out there that enjoy rights of this Constitution.
No, I'm not separating them. I'm not separating them. The federal government separated them. The federal government called them 14th Amendment slaves and property and franchises. I didn't.
But the federal government's not not saying that you're noble and you have a claim to this land that nobody else has.
Well, in the way that you just verbalized it, we could turn it into a conversation, but I would disagree with the essence of what you just said. And I think it's crystal clear by way of common sense, let alone anything else, that there's a people that founded this nation, and they clearly said that they did so for themselves and their posterity. And last week, I'm going to mute you right now because last week you tried like hell to try to make the word posterity when I go back and listen to that video, it's funny to me. You very deliberately skimmed over the first part of the definition, and it's funny. It's notice. It's obvious. It's actually obvious to anybody that listens to it. You were deliberately trying to skate over the very first, obviously clear definition of the word posterity. This is from 1700s, Mike's, and look, it says blah blah blah, and how they can use the term for whatever. You wanted to bypass.
But you can't make your own definition.
I'm going to keep muting you, Joe. Let me finish, and then I'll be happy to let you talk. If you come back on, don't talk, or I'll mute you again. But you're free to talk when I'm done. The point is, it was very clear. Anybody can listen to the video and hear that you were really grasping at straws to try to give some twist on the word posterity. My point being that there was a people that established this nation, and then their own words and their own declaration, they did so for themselves and their posterity, which is common sense. Because if I went out and built a nation, I'd be saying too, this is for me and my son and my posterity. And so would the other 100 or 1,000 people that are building the nation with me. So the fact that there is such a thing as privity of blood, which Grant will tell you, and so I'll tell you, look it up, Joe. Look it up in a law dictionary. Look it up in the 10th. Privity of blood. Look up the word person.
The Bible uses the posterity of Adam.
The Bible talks about the posterity all over the place, going from Adam to Jesus Christ. You can trace it back. Okay. So there's clearly a posterity of God's people, and there's a posterity of the founders of this nation. So those people need to come together and stand in righteousness against all the corruption that's out there. That's what I was doing with Righteous Army. And I was doing it at that point just with any American in general. Well, now I'm taking it to the next level that the Creator Lord God Almighty has brought it to, through Grant, through my son, through me, through MJ, through several other people that aren't even here right now. There's plenty of people that know where we're coming from and they agree with us and they're on board. Just because they're not here on this talk tonight is irrelevant. These are the people that decide to show up and tune in tonight and listen to what had to be said. And we're going to make it, I'm making it my effort to make as many people aware of it as possible. You should be doing the same. Now, having said that, what we're doing, hold on, Dave. What we're doing is we're working on a process, a lawful, comprehensive process for posterity to put themselves forth as posterity, lawfully and peacefully through law, and to establish themselves as that lawful posterity that they are, with privity of blood, so that they can make a standing, so that they can then bring cases to the Supreme Court when there's a controversy that needs to be had, and there's plenty of them. And on that note, I'm not going to say anything more because, again, there are certain things we're just not going to talk about right now. So having said that, Tave has his hand raised, but before you say anything, Tave, feel free, Joe. Hold on, Tave. If you want to make a quick little comment, feel free to do so. I'll give you the space now. Go ahead.
Okay, he's not talking.
All right, if not, so go ahead, Tave.
Now, because I don't have posterity, I'm here trying to do my thing through the Articles of Confederation, through treaties and alliances that were provided to my people, also the indigenous, that through the Land Ordinance of 1785, and I believe there's even the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, providing documentation to those Cherokee that were here prior to this, and the deals were made. So I don't have the posterity, but yet I have a contract with these people that have the posterity. So I am entitled to what my paperwork will deem, which only helps Mike and everybody else with posterity, I believe. That's why I'm chasing this. And I wanted to ask if anybody else knew of any other possible document that I could look further down and see if it, aligns with anything like that, other than the ones I just mentioned, the Articles of Confederation, Ordinance of 1785, and the Northwest Ordinance. If anybody knows, that's it.
Yeah, Constitution and Bill of Rights.
Hold on. Grant was about to say something. Go ahead, Grant.
I'm not going to tell it to you here, but I can explain to you something legally
Okay.
that you could use.
All right, yes, say no more. He's got some information. There's a lot of things that we're not going to discuss publicly right now. Tave, as you know, you're welcome also to come to our meeting. I'll let
Okay.
you know when we're going to be there. You're welcome to be there.
All
And
right.
and Joe, you know, again, when you do your little heckle, because I say there's things we're not going to discuss, that is
Yeah.
not only immature,
But
but
it's
it's
funny.
it's telling of, like, again, that makes me like, wow, who is Joe really? Because even your common sense should be like,
My
yeah, that
common
makes
sense
sense.
is that you're going off the wall into cuckoo land, Mike. That's what you're doing.
Hey, all right, you know what, Joe? Then you don't need to join these meetings anymore. Okay, no
Good. Don't
problem.
send me no more emails then. Good.
No problem, no problem, Joe. You're
All right.
welcome to come, but if that's your feelings, feel free
Well,
to.
then go. Yeah. Well,
You
it's
know,
okay for you to criticize me, but I
Well-
can't say nothing about you. Otherwise, I'm
well,
gonna start
no,
a lake.
you just
You
said
know?
that you feel
Yeah, okay.
we're cuckoo. If we're cuckoo, you
Well,
don't
you
need to
are,
be
because you
here.
sounded nuts. You keep just saying the same thing over and over. I'm burning the midnight oil, but you're not telling us nothing. It's a top secret, though. We're gonna have a private meeting. You were gonna have a meeting a couple weeks ago. What happened? What happened? I sat around here all weekend waiting
See
for
again,
you.
everything you're saying right there sounds like you're making all the stuff off the top of your head to
You
try
said
to create a
you
little.
said in the video, Mike, 3 weeks ago, you were
Joe,
gonna meet at Grant's house this weekend. That's what
Joe,
you said. It
that's
never
right.
happened.
That's right. We have other things, and I said that we'll let you know definitively when we're going. And you told me you couldn't make it
Well,
that
when
time
you
anyway,
when were you
didn't
gonna
you?
let me know? At 12 o'clock noontime, the meeting was for 1 p.m. I mean, I got to drive to Tennessee.
Joe,
I mean,
Joe,
when were you gonna let me know?
you know that I'll let you know in a timely fashion. And again, Joe, I know sometimes you just heckle off the top of your mouth sometimes,
I know, and sometimes you ramble
without
on
thinking.
about the same thing, and I'm trying to
But
get
if
to the
you're gonna
bottom of
make the
this.
comment, I'm gonna mute you for a second. If you're gonna make the comment that you think that we're nuts, then it's true, Joe. There's no need for you to be here. If you really think that we're crazy. Now, if you were just saying that because you couldn't control your tongue and you want to try to come around, feel free. But if you
Again,
really
Mike,
feel
you've been
that
rambling
way,
on the whole
if
program.
if you really feel that way, okay? If you really feel that we're cuckoo and we're nuts, as you just said, no need for you to come around.
Every single
Otherwise,
point question is asked, you criticize, and
no.
you're taking the word posterity and coming up with your own definition of it. I went over the last video what posterity meant, and I gave you documents to back it up, and you started telling me no, I didn't.
No, and to the contrary, it's laughable when I listened to last week's video, how you sounded so much like you were grasping
It's
at
laughable
straws.
what you're saying, so it makes me wonder what you're saying.
You were grasping at straws.
That's what you have
all
no.
right, people can make up their own mind on that. I'm going to keep muting you for a second, Joe. People can make up their own mind. They can listen to last week's conversation. To me, it's laughable. You were clearly grasping at straws, trying to change the definition of the word posterity, desperately so.
No, I wasn't, Mike. No, I
You were
wasn't. I was giving you facts.
you desperately tried to change it. People can use their own mind and their own common sense to figure that out.
Joe, are we supposed to abide and honor contracts that we enter into with everything that we do, legal and lawfully? Do we still believe in that?
I don't know, Jay. I don't know what are you talking about, referencing to exactly?
Anything that we do legally and lawfully that we enter a contract with, let's say politically, governmental wise, are we not to honor that stuff? Because you may say, I don't like to hear you say Mike babbles on or repeats. What he's trying to stress the fact is this stuff is not bullshit. This is real. This is stuff that's documented, but it's just not been brought forward in the right standing and by enough people to make a difference. That's what we're trying to do, just like we were doing with the militia and the COVID bullshit. How many times did we have conversations for hours on end and we could never figure out why, if the world's going to come to an end or we're going to have an ultimate battle or any war go on, couldn't get any single one veteran, anybody in any military experience step forward and take responsibility or some type of leadership. Not one that entire time. I hate to hear you guys argue back and forth like that, because it's not something that's to be just, I don't know how to say it. It's not a game of tic-tac-toe that when it's over, it's over. This is the rest of our lives. This is everything that we have going to fall down on this. If we do it, if it's legally and lawfully and it's true, and these are documents and 100% contracts that have to be honored, Because if they don't honor these ones, then every single one of them here, all the way back and forward, are null and void.
Thank you, Dave. That was beautifully stated. And as all I was trying to say, Joe, is try to you know it about yourself. Many people have said it, and I said I like that about you. You've got that obstinate Connecticut, hard, nose, take no crap, ask questions personality. I love that about you. Okay, but when ask questions, make some comments, but we don't need the scoffing and the heckling. If I make a comment and you heckle, that's just not necessary. We don't need that.